The night was quiet, but inside the small one-room house, a storm was breaking. James sat on the wooden chair, staring at the two little babies sleeping on a torn mat. They were twins, two tiny girls with soft faces, breathing gently as if the world outside did not matter. He turned his eyes toward the doorway. His heart beat fast, because he knew what had just happened. Their mother, Rose, had walked out with a small bag in her hand. She didn't look back. She didn't even touch the babies one last time. James whispered to himself, his voice shaking, "She left. She left me with them." He bent down and touched the tiny hands of his daughters. They were too small to understand that their mother had gone. They were too innocent to know the kind of life that was waiting for them. James felt weak. He had no money. He had no job. He had nothing but the love in his chest and two hungry mouths that would cry before morning. As the night passed, one of the twins began to cry. Then the other joined. James tried to carry both at once, his hands trembling. He had never felt so lost. He tried to sing, though his voice broke, "Don't cry. Daddy is here. Daddy will not leave you." The room was dark, the lamp had gone out, but James kept rocking them in his arms until he himself began to cry. His tears dropped on their little foreheads. He whispered again, not to them but to God, "Why me? Why like this? What wrong did I do?" Days turned into weeks. James fought with hunger, with shame, with the gossip of neighbors. People whispered on the street, "That's the man whose wife ran away. He's raising twins alone. Let's see how long he lasts." Sometimes he wanted to run away too, but whenever he looked into the big eyes of his daughters, he found a strange kind of strength. He told himself, "If she abandoned them, I will not. If she gave up, I will fight." Morning after morning, James would carry the twins on his back, one in front, one behind, and walk from street to street searching for food, searching for work. People laughed at him. Some pitied him. A few kind women would drop a spoon of pap into a small plate for the children. James thanked them with tears in his eyes, but when he was alone, he asked himself, "How long can I keep going like this? How will I ever give them a better life?" Every night, when the twins were asleep, James sat in silence, staring at their faces, and made a promise in his heart. "I don't know how, but I will raise you. I will not let you suffer forever. One day, you will stand tall. One day, you will know your father never gave up." But life was not ready to make it easy for him. The days rolled into months. The twins grew, but James grew thinner. His shirts hung loose on his shoulders, his eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights. Every morning, before the sun rose, he would strap one child at his back and carry the other in his arms. He walked the dusty streets looking for small jobs. Sometimes he cleared gutters, sometimes he carried loads for strangers in the market. Whatever little he earned, he used to buy food for the girls. At times, James himself went hungry. He would sit at the edge of the bed, watching his daughters lick the last drop of pap, their small lips stained with hunger, and he would smile through his empty stomach. "As long as they eat," he whispered, "I can endure." But life was cruel. When the twins turned 2, sickness came. First, it was fever. Then, it was cough. James carried them from one chemist to another, begging for medicine he could not afford. "Please, help me. These are my daughters. Don't let them die," he pleaded. Some nights, he sat with one child burning with fever on his lap while the other cried for food. He rocked them, tears streaming down his face, praying, "God, don't take them from me. Don't let her abandonment become their death." There were days James almost broke. He stood in the market, watching other men with their wives beside them. Couples buying food, laughing together, their children clean and strong. He turned his face away, ashamed of his worn trousers, his dirty hands, his children clinging to him like fragile shadows. Neighbors whispered louder now. "He will fail. No man can raise twins alone. It is only a matter of time." But James shut his ears. He looked into the innocent eyes of his daughters and chose to fight harder. He began to wash cars at the junction, sometimes till midnight. With the little he made, he bought second-hand clothes for the girls. They were torn, but at least his daughters were covered. One evening, after a long day of work, James returned home to find his daughters asleep on the mat. He knelt beside them and broke down. His voice shook as he whispered, "Rose, you abandoned them. You left them to die. But look at them. They are still here. They are still breathing because I refused to let go." He wiped his tears, kissed their tiny hands, and made another promise, stronger than the first: "One day, you will not remember hunger. One day, these tears will turn into laughter. One day, the world will know that even a poor father can raise great daughters." But that road was still long, and the trials waiting for James and his twins were only just beginning. By the time the twins were old enough for school, James was both excited and afraid. He wanted them to learn, to have the education he never had, but he knew that even buying books was more than his pocket could carry. Still, he refused to give up. They must go to school, he told himself. They must have the chance their mother never cared to give. On the first day of school, James dressed them in second-hand uniforms he had bought from the market. The skirts were too big, the shirts faded, but he washed them until they looked almost new. He tied their hair neatly with ribbons cut from an old cloth, then held their small hands and walked them proudly to the school gate. The other parents stared. Some laughed quietly. "Look at that poor man, he thinks he can raise twins alone." Others said, "How long will he pay school fees? He can't even feed himself." James heard every word, but he kept walking, holding his daughter's hands tighter. The first term fees were small compared to what he feared, but still, he had to wash cars day and night to gather it. Sometimes, when he couldn't make enough, he went to the headmistress and begged. "Please, give me one more week. Don't send them away. I will pay, I promise." But promises were not always enough. Many times, the twins were chased out of class. They walked home barefoot, their notebooks half empty, tears in their eyes. "Daddy, they said we should not come back until you pay." Those words stabbed James like a knife. He would hold them close, his voice breaking, "Don't cry, my daughters. I will find the money. You will go back. I swear." So he worked harder. He carried sand at construction sites, fetched water for builders, even swept shops just to earn a little. His hands cracked, his body grew weak, but each coin he gathered was another step to keeping his daughters in school. The humiliation grew worse. Other children mocked the twins because their shoes were torn, because their lunch boxes were always empty. Some called them the abandoned children. One day, Naomi came home crying. "Daddy, why did Mama leave us? They all laugh at us in school." James' heart shattered. He knelt down, wiped her tears, and said softly, "Don't listen to them. Your mother's absence is not your fault. One day, those who laugh at you will clap for you. One day, you will be so great they will beg to know your name." That night, as the twins slept, James sat outside under the moonlight, whispering to himself, "If only they knew how many nights I go hungry, just so these girls can learn. If only they knew the shame I swallow every day. But one day, these sacrifices will speak." And so, even as the world mocked him, even as his body grew weaker, James refused to let go of the dream. Because deep inside, he believed that the twins who were abandoned would one day rise higher than anyone ever imagined. Years went by, and the twins grew into smart little girls. Though their shoes were torn and their uniforms patched, they carried themselves with pride because their father always told them, "Hold your head high. Poverty is not shame. Ignorance is the real shame." James continued to suffer in silence. Many mornings, he left home without eating, carrying loads in the market just to pay part of their school fees. Some evenings, he returned with blistered hands and an empty stomach, but he smiled at his daughters and asked, "What did you learn today?" That simple question became his daily joy. One day, Mary ran to him, waving her exercise book. "Daddy, I came first in my class." James stared at the paper, his eyes filling with tears. He lifted her in the air and kissed her cheek. "You see? My suffering is not in vain. You are my pride." Not long after, Naomi too brought home a prize for best handwriting. James hugged her tight. My daughter, you are a star. One day the world will know your name. The neighbors who once mocked began to whisper again, but this time in surprise. Those twins are sharp. Even with their poor father, they are beating the rich children in class. But still, the struggle was heavy. School fees kept rising. There were nights James sat outside in the dark, his head in his hands, wondering how to pay. Sometimes, the landlord threatened to throw them out because the rent was unpaid. Sometimes, James worked so late that he coughed blood. Yet, whenever he saw his daughters reading by the faint glow of a candle, whispering lessons to each other, his strength returned. One afternoon, the headmistress called James to the office. Fear gripped his heart, thinking it was another complaint about unpaid fees. But instead, she smiled and said, Mr. James, your daughters are among the best students in this school. You should be proud. James bowed his head, unable to hold back the tears. Thank you, Ma. They are all I have. I will give them everything, even if it cost me my life. But life did not stop testing him. Sometimes the girls fainted in class because they had no food in the morning. Other times, they walked home in the rain, drenched because James could not buy them umbrellas. And yet, in all of it, the twins excelled. They studied late into the night, whispering lessons to each other when their father had gone to work. They carried his dreams in their small hearts. One evening, after a long, hard day, James returned home to find his daughters asleep at the table, their books open, their pencils still in their hands. He looked at them for a long time, then whispered, Rose, you abandoned them. But look, they are becoming great. They will rise higher than you ever imagined. And when that day comes, the world will remember their father. He covered them gently with his old jacket, sat beside them, and stared at the moon through the broken window. His body was tired. His pockets were empty. But his heart was full of hope. Because he knew the breakthrough was coming. The day came like any other. James woke up early, carried buckets of water for builders at the construction site, and returned home with aching bones. He did not know that something greater was already waiting for him. At school that afternoon, the twins stood on the assembly ground with their classmates. The principal stepped forward with a loud voice, Today, we are honoring the best students of the year. The crowd of children clapped and cheered. James was not there, he was out hustling, trying to make enough to buy food. But the twins stood nervously, holding each other's hands. The principal raised her voice again. For the first time in the history of this school, both awards for academic excellence are going to sisters, twin sisters. Mary and Naomi James. The children shouted. Teachers clapped. The twins walked forward, shy but proud, their hearts beating fast. They were given shiny certificates and a letter. Inside the letter was news that would change everything, a scholarship. Full sponsorship for their education. That evening, James dragged his tired body home. He was ready to collapse on the mat, but instead, the twins rushed to him, waving their certificates. Daddy. Daddy. We won. We got scholarships. James froze. The paper nearly slipped from his hands as he read the words again and again, tears blinding his eyes. He sank to his knees, hugging his daughters tight against his chest. My God, is this real? After all the hunger, after all the shame, after all the nights we cried together, you have remembered us. Neighbors gathered, staring in surprise as the man they once mocked cried openly in the street, clutching his daughters as if he would never let go. That night, James did not sleep. He sat watching his daughters, who were smiling in their dreams, their certificates safely tucked under their pillows. He whispered into the silence, Rose, you left them to die. But look at them now, chosen, lifted, blessed. The daughters you abandoned will rise, and when they do, the world will know the father who carried them through fire. For the first time in years, James felt a deep peace in his heart. The road ahead was still long, but at last, he had seen the light of hope. And that light was shining through his daughters. Years passed, and the scholarship carried the twins higher than James ever dreamed. They no longer wore torn uniforms or went hungry to school. They studied with determination, remembering every sacrifice their father made. While other children slept, Mary and Naomi burned the midnight candle. When others played, they pressed their books to their chests. They had seen poverty face to face, and they were determined never to return there. James grew older, his back bent from years of labor, but his heart was strong. Every time the twins came home with new prizes, medals, or letters of praise, he felt his youth return. He would sit them down and say, "Never forget where you came from. Remember the tears we cried together. Remember the days we had nothing." And they remembered. By the time they finished secondary school, on their Waikiki exam they scored as all their subjects. The twins had become the pride of the entire community. Their names were known. Teachers spoke of them with respect. Then they registered for JAM and their seat for to write JAM examination. They did very well. Mary scored 378, Naomi scored 389. When they gained admission into the University of Nigeria Nsukka to study medicine and surgery, the neighbors who once mocked James now came to his door with gifts. "Forgive us," they said. "We didn't know these children would be great." James only smiled, but in his heart he whispered, "I knew. I always knew." University life was not easy, but the scholarship continued. Mary and Naomi worked harder than ever. There were nights they cried over heavy textbooks, nights they nearly gave up, but each time they remembered their father's hands, cracked, rough, bleeding from years of work, they wiped their tears and pressed forward. At last, the day came. The twins stood side by side, wearing their white coats, their stethoscopes shining around their necks. Doctors. Real doctors. The same girls the world once mocked as abandoned children. James sat in the front row of the graduation hall, his old shirt ironed carefully, his eyes wet with tears he could not stop. When the twins received their certificates, they did not walk off the stage. Instead, they turned, walked down into the crowd, and knelt before him. "Daddy," Naomi said softly, her voice trembling. "This is your victory. Everything we are," Mary added, "is because you never gave up on us." The hall went silent. Then, slowly, people began to clap. Loud, thunderous applause filled the room, but James did not hear it. His ears were full of his own heartbeat, his eyes full of tears. He lifted his daughters up and held them close. "I carried you when I had nothing," he whispered, "but today you carry my name with honor." But the twins were not done. They had a surprise. Years later, after practicing as doctors and saving their earnings, they returned to their father with papers in their hands. "Daddy," Mary said, smiling, "this land belongs to you now." And on it, Naomi continued, "We will build something that will carry your name forever." Brick by brick, stone by stone, the building rose. A great hospital, shining with glass windows and wide doors. And above it, in bold letters, the name. James Memorial Hospital. The day it was opened, the poor father who once carried his daughters on his back now walked proudly through the gates, hand in hand with his twin daughters. The same neighbors who once mocked him now stood aside, clapping, bowing, whispering his name with respect. James lifted his eyes to the sky, tears rolling freely. "God, this is more than I ever prayed for. My pain has turned into glory." And as the crowd cheered, the twins stood beside him, shining like stars, proving to the world that even abandoned children, when loved by a father who refuses to give up, can rise to greatness. Please, after watching this story, don't go without doing this: subscribe and turn on your notification bell, like this video, drop your thought on your comment section, and share this video. Thank you if you have done that. May God bless you and lift you to higher level. Amen.